Hello, stroke survivors and families everywhere. Welcome back to Stroke Warrior Radio. Today we're in our second or third show, I can't remember, with Stacie Wyatt. Hey, Stacie, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me back.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you. I love your insight. Well, welcome back. Our first two conversations, we've explored adaptive yoga, neuroplasticity, emotional recovery, rebuilding confidence, and finding a new identity. Uh, Did we really cover that much?
I think we touched on it all.
Yeah, I do too. Well, today I'd like to shift our focus to something every survivor, whether it's TBI or stroke or whatever, um, the other 23 hours a day.
Yeah.
Therapy appointments eventually end, but recovery doesn't. And we've discussed that with many of our survivors and therapists. Today, let's talk about how we can incorporate adaptive yoga principles into everyday life as recovery becomes something they live rather than something they have to attend. How's that
Beautiful.
sound?
That's beautiful. That's my mojo. I love that. I love that. That's a great way to capture how the principles of a yoga lifestyle, I like to refer to it as a lifestyle, because really the time that we spend in a chair or on a yoga mat, on the floor, or wherever we are, is just simply a practice for our life. So when we are actually doing the movements that have been adapted from a traditional practice to somebody who might just be sitting in a wheelchair, or maybe like for me, like I can get on the floor, but it's not my preferred place because I have pain. So I prefer to sit in a chair. But what do we do after that? How do we take what we've learned in that 30 minutes or 45 minutes and then apply it to life? And so that's where the yoga lifestyle really comes in. Because if we are practicing yoga and we are in a certain shape in our body, and we could call that shape whatever we want to call it. Of course, there's a lot of different words that the yoga language or the yoga lifestyle or the yoga practice brings in, but I don't worry about the words. If I'm in a certain shape and I start to have thoughts in my head that I'm not good enough, I can't do this, I'm a loser, I'm broken, I'm never going to get better, then that internal narrative gets transferred to my life. So when we're in the shape during our practice time, I encourage students to feel a sensation first. So that brings awareness, which then we apply to our life. I'll tell you about that in a second, but we have a sensation. And then we watch our thoughts. Am I criticizing myself? Am I having fear about the sensation? Am I withholding my ability because I think I can't or I shouldn't or I'm not going to be able to? So we use this practice to really look at our thoughts. And it starts our thoughts about ourselves. If we're practicing by ourselves, then it's really about us. When we get into a group setting, then we have a tendency to start analyzing and having narrative about the other people. They're better than me. They can touch their toes. They can do this. They're not in a wheelchair. And then that becomes what we're practicing for life, where we go out into the world and we compare ourselves or our recovery or our limitations with other people. So to have a yoga lifestyle requires us to be present with our body first. And then that teaches us what am I talking about inside my head? What am I feeling in my heart? Because if I'm not good in this space where I'm in a shape, I'm probably not going to be good out in life. I'm probably going to have a lot of negative dialogue about myself out in life. So it really starts with bringing awareness to what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing. Where does fear come into play? I often will encourage somebody to sit in a chair, to sit really tall, bring your shoulders over your hips, lift one of your legs off the ground, and immediately it's like, I can't. Well, you're sitting in a chair, you're fully supported. Just see what would happen if you lifted one leg. Because, especially post stroke event, people may say, I can't, and maybe they can't. They can't lift their right leg at all. Well, they can lift their left. So we have to eliminate this narrative of I can't and instead change that to I used to. I used to lift that leg. Now I don't. And that's an awareness and an observation of what is present. And I think that that's the key to living the yoga lifestyle is being in the present because we can't go backwards to pre-event, whether it was a TBI, stroke. We can't we can't go back and take it away. We can't remove that event. So how do we make sense of what is today? I like to use movement to see where my mind goes. I struggle with a lot of pain and um, where does my mind go when I have pain? Will I always have pain? I don't know. Do I wish I
Yeah.
never had pain? Sure. But I don't. I do have pain.
Yeah.
So it's
Well, and
watching my thoughts.
I think it's interesting what your therapies do as far as mixing in the emotional and mental aspect of it. A lot of
Mm,
therapies, like you said, it's you get a physical therapist that checks off the list for protocol and
yeah.
walks away after putting you on a bike. Story of my
Yeah.
first 2 years. Um, but I think it becomes recovery becomes a lifestyle
Yeah.
to a certain extent. And I like that about your therapies. I'm curious, why do you, I know for me why this works, but why do you believe so much of recovery actually happens outside of formal therapy sessions?
Well, because to me, I think formal therapy sessions are so regimented. They're so rigid. They're pretty predictable. A PT or OT or a speech has, like you said, a protocol, and they're going to hit these objectives and these goals within that protocol for 35, 45 minutes, however long your session is. But really, life shows up out there in the world. We get rattled, we get triggered, we get overwhelmed in a grocery store. You can't recreate that in a therapy session because it's very controlled setting. There's people around, it's predictable and life is not predictable. So I like to have my style of teaching, my experience with the person to be very unpredictable because that teaches resiliency to life that is always changing. And we may start with a plan. Like I may have a student who says, I want to work on balance. I feel like I'm, more dominant on one side. So that's a tangible thing we can work on. But then the questions I would ask is, are you balanced in your life? Do you have an equal amount of pleasure as pain, joy and sorrow? Because it's not just physical balance that often creates an imbalance. It's how many thoughts of your daytime are negative or fear based or limiting or anger. There's nothing wrong with anger, but are you balancing anger with gratitude? Are you off balance there? Because that's living. And so I think my approach is really teaching somebody to take the tools that you learn in a session and then get out there in the world and go to the grocery store and be overwhelmed and then recognize you're in control of where your thoughts go, whether you react to it or respond to it, breathe through it. What are you doing? So when we're in a yoga shape and in a chair and it's uncomfortable and it's hard, a lot of people just want to give up and say, I can't do this. Well, what happens when we're at the grocery store and we're standing in line and we are overwhelmed by the lights, the sounds, the noise, the people? How do we sustain ourselves through that real life environment? And so I like to use what I learn in my sessions and what I teach is how do we stay with what's uncomfortable, remembering that everything is temporary and that we can do it. We can get through the uncomfortable parts of our life because it will pass. It will pass. The grocery store will pass. So it's really helping people see that you can be uncomfortable and it's not the end of the world, that you'll be okay.
I think one of the things that I go through, uh, maybe others do, but is in between um, after you're discharged from therapy or in between sessions or after therapy, quote unquote, ends, there's a mindset that we need to find. And
Mm,
that's hard to recognize. The mindset that first of all, that we're responsible for our own recovery. You know,
Right.
we have a thing up here that in my circles that um we're stroke survivors, but we make the choice to become a stroke warrior.
I
And
love it.
that's how do you coach that? I mean, how would you suggest to others that maybe, including me, even 11 years post-stroke, that I work on that mindset?
Yeah, mindset is probably the key that unlocks a lot of happiness in our life. And we it's hard because we're battling a couple things. We're battling one thing that I've noticed of recent, probably since COVID, is that culturally in our circles of communication with our friends, our family, our neighbors, people we meet on a walk, we have a tendency to speak about what's wrong in the world. And that could be what's wrong in my body, what's wrong in my family, what's wrong in the weather, what's wrong in my little orbit. And then that gets beyond that to what's wrong in our country, what's wrong in our cities, in our transportation, in our roads, in our weather. It just gets bigger and bigger. And so we have a tendency when we are with a group of people to talk about what's wrong in the world. And so if we can learn to recognize, to look at what's right in our world, then that will bloom out and that becomes our focus. But we're battling a cultural phenomenon where we get together. It used to be around the water cooler at a workplace and talk about what's wrong in the world. Well, that has broadened past the water cooler to our neighbors. We see our neighbor and we complain about whatever. And then we go to a dinner party and the discussion is about whatever. And not very many people are talking about what's good in the world. So for me, my mindset, people will say to me all the time, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you've had 6 hip surgeries and still do what you do. And it all boils down to mindset because I have a choice and I see my life as a choice. I have 2 paths. One way is to complain about everything that's wrong in my hip, everything that it limits me, what I can no longer do, how miserable it is to be in pain, how I need help putting a shoe on, all the things, and just consume my thoughts with what I don't have. That feels really crummy. I can immediately just feel just talking like that I feel lower energy. What's the use? I might as well just give up. A lot of people have suggested to me that I go on disability. Why are you still working? Well, because my other choice this way is to look at what's good in my life. I have a great medical team. I have beautiful work. I have a great family. I have a beautiful home. I have things that bring me joy. And so when I was at that fork in the road and I was no longer able to do what I used to do because of my hip problem, I decided it is up to me to make a conscious choice every day to find happiness because otherwise I'm going to slip down that slippery slope into self-pity, depression. I can't. So for me, every day mindset is an absolute choice that I make. What will I do today that brings me joy? And I make it happen. That's my responsibility, nobody else's. And so teaching somebody that even though they've had a life-changing event, such as a stroke, that they still have choice. They can still choose happiness, choose joy, find a new hobby. During my recovery, I was so brokenhearted that I couldn't do my work anymore that I decided I was going to learn how to bake bread. And that became my joy. And so I embarked on a bread baking journey. And now I sell bread. I became a cottage baker, and people put orders in once a week, and I bake a ton of sourdough bread. But that was a choice I made that I was going to replace a loss and fill it up with a joy. And and that's how I get up every day and say, okay, well, what am I going to choose today? I can no longer ride a bicycle, but I can do all these other things. And I'm going to choose one of those things that make me happy. It really is choice.
Yeah, you brought out some great terms there. First of all, there's choice, there's accountability, there's responsibility, there's desire. I mean,
Yeah.
I think in my recovery, what happened was once I started recognizing the little advances, if you will, I call them warriors achieving victories every day. Those small victories, they add up, and
Yeah.
that's what helps you make those choices. But I mean, for me, it's back and forth through the conscious and unconscious choices.
Yeah.
So many interruptions in our lives create these unconscious choices that just destroy our recovery, maybe only for a day, but it can go long term too.
Yeah. And then it's this beautiful thing of giving yourself grace and knowing that even despite a day where the choices aren't for your greatest self, that maybe the choices aren't stepping you forward in your recovery, you get a chance tomorrow to do it all again, that you're not defined by a bad day, you're not defined by a bad choice, that each and every day brings a new opportunity, and that transformation of any kind, with or without brain injury, stroke, transformation is an ultimate choice. And choosing to um, give up, which I see a lot, that's hard to pull somebody out of that place of what's the use. But it can be done, but it's not my job to make that choice for them. It's their job to just be reminded that they still have potential, that they're still whole, that there's still good in them. It's hard. Like we've talked before about, in my world, when somebody has a brain injury, the primary focus of initial weeks of recovery is the person able to talk, walk, eat, toilet. That's it. And my lens that I look through is like, hold on a minute. Are we looking at their heart, their spirit, their purpose? Their ability to feel peaceful and whole despite losing, probably for many people, their occupation. If you are no longer able to do your occupation now, especially for a male, you've lost your identity to being a provider. And then that creates a whole other conversation and cycle of grief. And somehow, through the work that I do, we're able to sit with that grief, acknowledge it. Because I never want to tell somebody we shouldn't feel sad about that because you're still alive. Like that's so dismissive. But what with what your aliveness is today? What can we do with that? And for a lot of my students and people I've worked with, for many of them, and it's hard to get to this point, but for many of them, they will tell me that their accident was the best thing that ever happened to them because their life was on a trajectory to take for granted what they have, the people in their life. They were seeking out things that no longer matter because they had a brush with death. And now what matters is relationship, health, spirituality, gratitude. They don't care about the fancy cars and houses anymore. They just want to recognize life. And that's not everybody feels that way, of course. People really grieve their life before their event. I think in time they can see that perhaps this newness that I've obtained through a devastating injury or event has shed a light on the place that was missing in my life. And that's where my work comes in, to affirm that and to encourage them to look not just at what they've lost, but what have they possibly gained. And for many of the people that I have worked with, what they've gained is a deeper understanding of who they are that's not attached to their occupation or their label, but truly figuring out that they are a good human being and that their story matters. So I encourage people to share their story and share their transformation from whatever they were before to whatever they are now. It's hard though.
It is hard, and I think one of the things that I had to learn for myself was being aware of those changes in my desires, needs, wants,
Mm,
all of that. So, I
yeah.
mean, that's one of the curious things and why I want to get a little more involved with the yoga myself, because in meditation, I find those things out,
Yeah.
about myself. And
Yeah.
yoga gives you tools to, I don't know, let your brain loose
Yeah.
to actually think about what really matters.
Yeah. There's a term in the yoga world called svadhyaya, which is just a fun word to say, svadhyaya. And it means self study. It means stop looking outward for the answers and look inward, because we have all the answers, and to stop comparing our recovery with the other person in our group or the person that's in our support group, or the neighbor or whoever, and stop comparing ourselves and really look at ourselves. And one of the things that was the hardest for me after my hip replacement that went awry was that people would often say to me, "Oh gosh, my grandfather had one and he was running a marathon in a couple weeks. You'll be fine." Or, "You're strong, you're young, you'll be fine." And there was a dismissiveness about it. And I felt like there was a lot of comparing every other person's hip replacement that they knew with mine. And we just can't do that as a community. We can't compare ourselves or have people compare for us, because our experience is our own. And that's where I stopped reading about other people's hip replacements, because this was about me figuring out in my body how I can navigate this. And so self study, or svadhyaya, really looks at, where are my thoughts going? Where's my mind taking this? Am I buying a ticket onto a train that leads to nowhere? Because I'm going into the future of what if, and what if I never recover? What if I never get better? What if I never can sit on the floor? What if I lose my business? What if blah, blah, blah? That's a ticket on a train to nowhere. And so being able to pull myself back into self study and say, okay, that's a thought of based on fear. That immediately stopped it. That's a thought based on fear. And then I would bring my awareness back to, I felt a lot of pain today. Like, my hip feels okay today. I'm aware of what I'm feeling. Mostly I was aware of my thoughts. I mean, the pain is the pain, but it's just, I think yoga gives us a chance to really be in the moment, to look at what's going on up here
Yeah.
that's taking me out of the present moment and out into the reality of what is. Yeah, self study is
I
cool.
think one of the things that uh, I think you've mentioned this before, but um, making your home environment better to influence your recovery. What's that look
Mhm.
like?
Well, mm, I think we have to, they often say that our home environment is a reflection of our inner world. And so, tangibly, if our home environment is cluttered and there's papers everywhere and books everywhere and things out of place, that's not going to support a peaceful mind, because that is an example of what's going on in here, a lot of clutter. So for me, I like to have, spaciousness in my environment, so that I feel like I have space in my head, space in my heart. So that's a very practical thing. And I think, too, surrounding yourself with people who don't dismiss your struggle. I think it's fair for people to say, that must be hard. The thing that I missed the most in my hip surgery saga was that nobody acknowledged that this was hard. They felt bad for me. I feel so bad for you. Or they wanted to solve my problem. Well, have you done this? Or you should sue your surgeon, or, all of these ridiculous things. Instead of just simply sitting with me and saying, that must be really hard. Because acknowledging the truth gives the person an affirmation that it is hard. And that's okay. Life can be hard. But when we try to smooth it over and people try to make us feel better by, "You're so strong, you got this," I think that it can feel very dismissive. So for me, I had to pick and choose who was in my environment, who was allowed to come into my recovery space. I wanted somebody that was not going to pity me, feel bad for me, or dismiss or try to solve my problem. I just wanted somebody to tag along with me and encourage me.
Yeah. I think too, one of the things I'm learning, at least my interpretation, about yoga is it's a not just the exercise, it's an environment that
Yeah,
you've created not only in your mind, but you're creating a space that promotes calmness and healing in your home. I mean, such
absolutely.
as what, lighting, music,
Yep.
s-
I have a space that is reserved for me. And so um, if the door is shut, people know don't come in. That's my time. And it's not that I have a boundary against people. I just have margins in which I put this in my life. I've often been a person that's against boundaries because I feel like boundaries push people away from us. And instead, I like the word margins because with a margin, we get to choose what we put into our day versus I have a boundary around that. That's a deflection, but I have margins. So, you know, I think too having nice music complements my peacefulness and my presence, but it's not a requirement for me because again, if I'm going to live the yoga lifestyle, I can't create an environment that's so perfect for my yoga session that when I open the door and go out into the real world, I'm blasted with things that aren't peaceful because life is going to challenge us. So sometimes I will encourage my students, we're going to have a yoga session outside and there's a barking dog and there's traffic and there's a lawnmower. And are we going to think about those things or are we going to think about our bodies and our thoughts and our breathing? Because we have to be able to practice a not ideal environment practice to then apply for life because life's never going to be perfect. So a
for
lot of
sure.
times people will say to me, well, I can't meditate because it's too noisy. The noisier it is, probably the more you need it. Because if you're thinking about the noise, you're missing the whole point. We should be able to quiet down our mind with practice despite noise, because noise is going to happen wherever we are. We can't create a perfect environment. It sets us up for failure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I love that margin thing. Um, One of the things too that I correct me if I'm wrong, but you have set your created routines within those environments. How
Yeah.
important is that for recovery?
I think it's paramount. I say this all the time when I'm working with yoga teachers and just people is that we have to find relatable movements for the people to feel comfortable in their own skin. That's a starting point. Maybe later on we can introduce some of the more traditional yoga things. But like for men are, no offense, pretty resistant to this yoga thing because in our minds we picture yoga for 20-year-olds in cute little yoga outfits doing fun little things. But the reality is yoga's for everybody. And so to get men, we'll say in a setting, in a support group setting, or a group session that's going to tag onto a PT session, and it's predominantly men. I will use familiar things to men, and I'm generalizing, but most men enjoy football or have an awareness of football. And so I have a choice. I can come in as the floaty, woo woo yoga girl and say, we're going to practice yoga and it's going to be boring. So instead, I'm like, okay, I'm going to meet these guys where they're at. And I spent months learning the NFL football signals for when the referee blows the whistle, throws the flag. This is a touchdown. In the yoga world, it's called Tadasana or mountain pose. This is field goal. I don't know what it's called in yoga, maybe cactus. Doesn't matter what it's called. And then we have a false start. Well, when I do false start, and I'm moving my arms like this. Again, the brain is being activated because both sides of the body are working. So it's asking the hemispheres of the brain to work together. And I'm going to turn. That's going to make it even crazier. And we're going to go backwards in our false start and go to the other side. So the men get curious like, how does this person know all these football signals? Here's a safety. Pull your elbows back. Feel that? And then we have offsides, personal foul, pass interference, holding, taunting, illegal man downfield while you're there, get a stretch. Personal foul, unnecessary roughness, open your chest. 15 yards, half the distance to the goal, automatic first down. And pretty soon, the men are sitting up in their chairs and they're like, wait, you forgot delay of game. You forgot roughing the passer. And so we create movement with familiar things to whoever's in front of me. We talked last time about if I've got a group of women in their 80s who are living in assisted living who would give anything to be back into a kitchen with a mixing bowl. We're going to make a pie. Tell me what goes in the pie. They know this. It's part of their DNA. They know flour, sugar, salt, whatever. And so meeting somebody who's in front of me with their interests, with their history, just to get movement in. Then, well, when you're doing a touchdown, first, how many points is it? Well, it's 6. That stimulates memory. Where might you feel this? If I feel it in my shoulders, in my back, take your touchdown and reach a little behind you. Oh, I feel something here. Now, I could have done that entire sequence in a strange language known as Sanskrit or the yoga language that would have meant nothing to the people in front of me.
Yeah.
So it's bringing fun to it. It doesn't have to be hard and serious. It's fun.
I, and this may sound ridiculous, but I, I've been noticing the exercise, the yoga, the physical therapy exercise, whatever, and the everyday life. Which one is the actual original movement? Is it the
Yeah.
yoga or is it the household chores?
Boy, and just being able to reach your arms above your head, even if it's just one arm because your left arm's affected, and being able to reach for something in the top of your cabinet. Well, if we're practicing that in a session, and then we're going to lean forward a little bit because that's a reality. To get that thing off the top shelf, you have to lean forward. If we're standing, then we have balance happening. And so I think all of the movements that I might do in a session are very functional for living. Bending over to touch your toes. If you can, great. If you can't, that's okay too. But you're going to have to pick something up off the floor or pick a weed or, take care of your animal or whatever you need to do. So I think people are hesitant of the word yoga for one thing. And so
Yes.
sometimes I might change my class description to mindful movement or movement with connection. And for many of my sessions, when I knock on the door and I go into the rehab place or I go into the assisted living, I simply say, "Hey, I'm Stacy and I came to hang out with you." Well, what does that look like? I don't know, but let me sit by you. Give me your hand. And then I touch their hand and I start feeling their hand. And I say, wow, you have working man hands. What did you do for work? And then a conversation comes about. Well, I was a carpenter. Oh, so then we talk about carpentry. And what did you do for free time? I loved fishing. You mean fly fishing or reel fishing? With a reel. And so then we do movement that mimics what something in their life that was passionate to them. We go
Yeah.
fishing. Um, and I think there's a place for formal, PT type exercises that's called, dead bug or whatever they call these things. But for me, I have found the most success getting people to feel good about what they're doing because it's fun and relatable. And I just am astounded to see people who don't know what day of the week it is, don't know what year it is, can't remember what they had for lunch, but they know those football signals. And we do it over and over, and they laugh and they're confident. They feel good about themselves. They know that when Sunday football comes, they're going to be looking at that referee, which stimulates a connection in their memory center of I've done this, now I'm seeing it, I'm going to do it again. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is. And it breaks down all the way to preparing a meal. I mean,
Yeah.
preparing a meal gives you an opportunity to balance coordination, memory, sequencing, the whole 9 yards, right?
Yes, all of it. And that's what I do love is like, I feel like the work of even doing football yoga or stirring the pie crust stimulates neurons in the brain that ignite memory, that give confidence. Like, I do know this. I do know this. And then that gives that next little nudge for when the person wants to prepare a simple meal that we might have to practice a few times and repeat a few times. But if we're repeating in other areas like yoga practice or PT or speech or OT, and we're repeating those things, that builds layers of confidence for out there in life when, okay, I can do this. I can make a grilled cheese because I know the steps. I know the steps. So, yeah, for
I,
sure.
I think one of the things you've said before too is um, develop. For me, I preach consistency and repetitiveness. One of the
Hmm.
things you do is routine.
Yeah.
Um, how do you, if you're helping someone create a daily routine, especially a stroke or TBI survivor, where would you begin with that customer, client, tenant?
Well, I think what I found to be the most successful for people and gives them the most self determination, because I believe in empowerment versus being told what to do, is I think sitting down with somebody and asking them what's most important to you today. What would be something that you would want to accomplish today? And maybe it's just simply today I'm going to sit outside. I want to sit outside. I want to take a shower. I want to write an email. Three things. And I like to use visual support. So I'm big with whiteboards or a piece of paper. I love check boxes for myself because it gives accomplishment. After I have sat outside, I can cross that off because that not only shows that I've succeeded at something, but it also is regulating to the nervous system. Because for many people who have sustained a brain injury, their concept of time passing has changed. So they might see the whole day ahead of them as very open. When will this end? And so I like to create structure with visual support because when we're together in a session, we're going to do these four things. And then I will often ask at the end of the four sessions, did we build community? Did we talk? Did we connect with each other? Yeah, we did. Did we move? Yep. Did we breathe? Yep. And were we grateful? Yep. Then the session's over. So to create a daily routine takes those same principles. I'm going to have coffee. I'm going to sit outside. I'm going to start a load of laundry. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to write an email. I'm going to take a shower. And so as they go through this, and I might help them create that schedule, they can cross it off. That gives a timeline to their day. Because for a lot of people, they lose their ability to even understand what an hour feels like. You and I might know what an hour feels like. Like we've been sitting here for 45 minutes, we're coming into the tail end. We can feel that. But for some people who've had changes to their brain, they don't understand that anymore. So we have to give structure to it. And as they know that as they accomplish these things, their day is moving forward, and at the end of their day, they'll watch their movie, have their ice cream, and go to bed. And now they have a completed day where they have determined what they want their day to look like. So there's self determination, there's empowerment, there's success, and there's a beginning and an end, which helps regulate the emotions that come when we don't know. Like if I said to you, hey, I want you to come over on Saturday, and that's all the information I gave you, you would immediately be thinking, what are we going to do? How long am I going to be there? Do I need to bring anything? What do I need to wear? And the anxiety goes up because there's no rhyme or reason to, we're going to do this. So when I'm working with the clients, I give them a reason as why we're doing this. We're going to do these four things. And this is the beginning and this is the end. And you will know when we're finished because everything is crossed off. Doesn't mean that that support has to be there forever. But when I was working with special ed students in the school district, the teacher would often say to me, the students know what we're doing because we do the same thing every day. I said, okay, can I have your calendar, please? And can I have your phone? Oh, you can't have my calendar. I need it. Well, you're going to do the same thing that you do every day. So you don't need that calendar. And you don't need your phone because you just don't need it. You know where you're supposed to be. Taking away natural supports like a calendar or a phone or a tablet is the most dysregulating thing that we could do to somebody. I know what I'm doing today, but I still refer to it. I still look at my calendar every day to ground me, to say, oh, okay, this is what's on my calendar today. And to not provide somebody that support that's simple, I think is a disservice.
Such an important word, grounding.
Mhm.
It just was like, aha, I have to ground myself in my routines and my desires, I guess, and what I
Yeah.
want to accomplish. That's really
Yeah.
cool. I like that. A little more practical though. Excuse me. How important are hydration, movement, rest, and consistency and recovery in your mind?
I think hydration is key. I think making sure that we're getting enough water is really important, especially on hot days in the summer. I think people can forget to drink water or they think, well, I've had a Coke and that's liquid and that's okay. So, I mean, I think hydration is great for brain health. I think it's great for the body. Stay hydrated. It helps our blood pressure. It helps so many systems in our body. I think rest rest is important. However, I'm more of a proponent of movement versus rest. Could be why my hips hurt all the time. But I think that we have a lifestyle that's pretty restful. I think a lot of us sit down more than we would admit we sit down. I think resting is fine. I think resting is good. I'm not a big rester myself, but I think there's again that balance. If I'm going to watch a movie that's an hour and a half, then I need to balance that with an hour and a half of something active, not an exercise or a workout. Maybe I take a stroll in my neighborhood and that takes 30 minutes. Maybe I do a little bit of gardening that takes 20 minutes. I do some household chores so that I'm not sitting the entire day, that I'm balancing the hour and a half movie with an hour and a half of something active ish, up and about. I know for me, I don't sit until I go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. I don't sit all day. Like when I'm done with you, I will go for a walk. And so, how I've made sense of it in my own life is if I sit for an hour, I better walk for 30 minutes. If I sit for 30 minutes, I'm going to walk for 15. I cut it in half. And that helps my body. Some may say I am too busy, I walk too much. But for me, that helps my emotions, my mental health, my nervous system. Because when I sit too long, then I get restless, I get anxious, I have pain. And I think people might confuse numbing ourselves away from reality. I think it's okay to rest as long as it's not numbing ourselves from the emotional feelings that we have. And that can be a slippery slope. So I'm going to binge on Netflix all day because I don't want to face my reality. That's an unhealthy rest. Watching a movie or watching a show or reading a book, that's a perfectly healthy rest. As long as you feel that you're balanced with other things, I'm all for it.
Cool. I know we're running out of time really quick. I got so much more to talk about. We'll have to do it in another show.
Of course.
Anything else you want to add for today?
I want to touch a little bit on the power of gratitude because I think for me, it did transform my life going from in my 20s being a very toxic and angry person and somebody suggesting to me you should write down three things you're grateful for, and I thought it was the biggest bunch of nonsense I ever heard in my life. But because I'm a Capricorn and somebody tells me to do something, I do it because I have responsibility that drives me. I started writing down three things every day that I was grateful for. And then part of the guidelines was it could not be the same three things within 1 week period. So the first day was easy, my kids, my house, my dog. Day two was kind of easy, my coffee, the sunshine, the walk I took. Day three, it's getting harder. By day seven, I was actively looking for things that I could write down in my gratitude journal. Day 8 came and I was like, okay, I can go back to my friends, my family, my dog. But over time, and this has been now 26 years of gratitude, in my office, in another room, I have 26 years of notebooks of things that I'm grateful for. 26 years of daily gratitude. So whenever I feel crummy or that I don't have something, I just pull out one of those books and I look at a year's worth of blessings. It's astounding. But what researchers have found is that when we not just feel grateful, but we take the time to actively write down 3 things every day, different things that we're grateful for, it changes our nervous system, it changes our heart rate, it helps our sleep improve, it helps our emotional resiliency, it helps us when triggers come because we are anchored in blessings and abundance and gratitude. It is really easy. And it goes back to our first part of the conversation to collectively complain about what is not good. But if we can shift that in our mind to be aware of what is good in our life, that will grow exponentially. It will grow to the point where even when something tragic happens, gratitude overrides the tragedy. It's fascinating to me what gratitude has done for my life. And I think of it this way, and perhaps we talked about this before, but this is, I love to live in metaphors and I love visualization of things. So I picture in my brain, I have this little tiny car. And for 28 years of my life, it drove down a certain dirt road to lack and limitation, not enough. And the more I drove on that dirt road, the deeper the ruts became. That car was on that path and it was going to the same destination year after year. Not enough. I'm not good enough. My life's not good enough. Things don't happen to me. Everybody else has everything easy, and life's not easy for me. This sucks. Same destination. I get a choice to turn that car around and go down a different road. And that road leads to gratitude, to awareness, to presence, to blessings, to abundance. And now, when my car veers down the fear, limitation, I'm quickly able to turn my car around and just now I'm going this way. And my life is so much richer because I'm looking at all the good in the world. And when people get together in my circle, I get together with friends, we have coffee, and they immediately start talking about what's wrong in the world. I'm very intentional, not bossy, but I just say, let's talk about what's good in the world because that's turning a collective car around. So, developing an appreciation for small things every day. And so, when I started my gratitude practice, and the person told me to write down 3 things. I was probably in week 2 or 3, and I was standing in a coffee shop, and I knew I had to write 3 things down. And there was a kid behind me that was really rambunctious. Before my gratitude project, I would have been annoyed at that kid. I would have been like, control your kid. Why is he so noisy? But now that I'm a person of gratitude, I saw joy in that little kid. I saw that kid was so excited to get a treat at the coffee shop. He couldn't contain his excitement. And I saw it as a blessing rather than a hindrance. And that's because I was shifting my thinking from my life sucks to wow, there's joy right there. There is absolute joy in that child. And so my life transformed in every area. I went from 260 pounds of anger in my body to a healthy weight, to a vibrant lifestyle. It all changed when I started to take my thoughts to gratitude.
Changing those perceptions. I love that.
Yeah.
How do people find more out more about what you do or how who all of that?
Well, you can find me online. My business is called Embracing Spirit Yoga. which Embracing Spirit came as a blog that I started writing about raising a disabled child way, way, way back in the day. And so that became the name of my business, Embracing Spirit. So I have a blog, I have a website, I'm on Instagram, I have a YouTube channel. I'm currently doing 30 days of yoga in August, and most of the practices are 15 minutes at the most. They're always adapted to a chair. Most of the time, we're just standing in my backyard. And so that has been a great thing for people who are unfamiliar with yoga to just have 10 minutes, 15 minutes to just learn about their body. And so that's happening right now. We're on day 12. So you can always go back to that on YouTube and check it out
What's
and
that
learn my
called?
style. Embracing Spirit Yoga on YouTube.
Okay, okay, just by going to the name.
And there's a
That's very awesome.
playlist that's 30 Days of Yoga 2026. It's the fourth year that I've done the 30 days. I do it every August because I really want to teach people one other thing about yoga is you don't have to have a studio. You don't have to have fancy clothes. You don't have to have an hour. You don't have to pay for it. That you can today, I walked out on my back deck. I have blue jeans on. I had a chair next to me to help support my body because my hips hurt. And I did 10 minutes with a chair in blue jeans. I just want to show people that it doesn't have to be a big deal. You can do it anywhere. You don't need to have special anything.
Beautiful. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for your contributions again today, Stacy. I always love talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. I really appreciate it. For our listeners, if someone listening today feels discouraged or believes their recovery has stopped or reached one of those ridiculous plateaus that aren't there, um, please share this with other people, at least two people. What gives you hope um, can be learned and it can be practiced. I want to challenge you all to listen to Stroke Warrior Radio and check out Embracing Spirit Yoga on YouTube and have a great and fantastic week.